I'm pretty loud. I might have to put this down eventually. How's everybody doing? Good. Let's wake up. Let's shake up. We're on the South Side. We're in Hyde Park, an extremely historic community, right? My name is Kina Collins. I'm a native of the Austin community, born and raised on the west side of Chicago. I come from a large working class family that is pro-union. My dad has been a Teamsters paying dues member for 30 years. My mom is a crossing guard and a certified nursing assistant. And organizing has been in my blood from the very beginning. Integrity, hard work, and keeping community at the core has been what my family has taught me about my experience in Austin. I am a proud Chicago Public School alumni. Anybody else a proud Chicago School alumni? And I say proud because I am what good investment of education, of a public school education looks like. Every child in our district should feel competent and confident enough to want to run for Congress and have the confidence and the tools to do that. And that's what Chicago Public Schools did for me. So I know that the model exists when you invest in students and you don't define students by their zip codes or their neighborhoods, and you give an equity agenda to education. This is what good education looks like. I left Chicago Public Schools and went to the Louisiana State University in South Louisiana, go Tigers. And during my time in Louisiana, I saw up close and personal that the economic realities of working class families was the same everywhere that we go. Whether it's on the west side of Chicago, the south side of Chicago, Flint, Michigan, Youngstown, Ohio, or in the bayous of Louisiana. The realities of working class people was the same. I saw how the big major oil companies in Louisiana polluted the air and didn't have solutions for families when oil spills happened. And how FEMA didn't do their job when families were left to fend for themselves during hurricane season. I saw all of that up close and personal. I came back from Louisiana and moved back into the Austin community because I believe that the students, the young people, the families in my neighborhood also deserve a blueprint on how to move and elevate out of the community. And in that time, I started Chicago Neighborhood Alliance. The Chicago Neighborhood Alliance is an organization, community organization, that works on gun violence reduction, and it does it by keeping youth activists and people in the community empowered through civic engagement. This past municipal election cycle, we worked with some pretty cool names that ended up getting inaugurated today, and helped push to get them elected into office and stand in the forefront. That democracy is not a sideline sport, that the everyday people should have a say in what goes on in our politics. And from there, I saw the inequity in the Illinois 7th Congressional District. I saw how when I came back from LSU that we didn't just have neighborhoods that had abandoned buildings, now we had abandoned schools. And that was a huge issue for me. The DCCC does this huge talk about the power of keeping a majority incumbent in office and the power of seniority. But majority and seniority means nothing without leadership. And if our communities are crumbling, then we need to vote them out. That is the stance that I took. Absolutely, thank you. We can have a community that does away with racist criminal justice system. We can have a community that invests in education and affordable housing. We can have a community that says healthcare is a human right, because it is. And so let's talk a little bit. This is out. Can y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm. Keep going.
I'm loud. We're just gonna do it. Let's talk about the way that we can do that in Illinois 7th. Can y'all hear me in the background? In the back? We need to decriminalize poverty, number one. That is the number one thing that we need to do. Yeah, woo-hoo for that. We need to decriminalize poverty. And there's several ways that we need to go about it. My job that I do now, I'm a national organizer for PNHP. So for me, saying single payer Medicare for all is not just a policy talking point. My job is to organize 20,000 doctors and medical students across this country to advocate on behalf of patients and to secure a single payer Medicare for all system in our country. And we've done that a numerous amount of ways. I've traveled to the Appalachians. I've traveled to San Diego and spoke with immigrants' rights groups. I've traveled down south in Alabama and spoke to patients and doctors and physicians and medical students in the South. And the truth is, healthcare is a purple issue. It's not red, it's not blue. When you go to places in the Rust Belt like Missouri or other places like Pittsburgh, and folks are cutting their blood pressure pills in half because they can't afford their prescription drugs and their rent every month, we have not just a policy and a political issue in this country, we have a moral issue in this country. And that is something that is the core and the impetus of my run. And so I plan to support a single payer Medicare for all system. For me, American citizens should not be strapped down by premiums and high prescription drugs and copays. We are the only developed country in the world who does not have a universal healthcare system. We pay 17% of our GDP in the healthcare system, and we have worse healthcare outcomes than anybody else, and that ain't right, in my opinion. Decriminalizing poverty means reconstructing the criminal justice system. In the Illinois 7th, 44% of children under the age of 18 are living below the poverty line. 25% of families are. So a lot of what we see in Illinois 7, when we see youth in particular getting caught in the criminal justice system, it has a lot to do with housing, and it has a lot to do with poverty. So I take the stance that I want to reduce the age federally for how we prosecute children. We need to get rid of it completely, but I support reducing the age of how we prosecute children as adults. I believe we need to end the cash bail bond system. We need to completely get rid of it. And the number one thing that we need to focus on in Illinois 7, particularly around criminal justice reform, is treating drug addiction as a public health emergency and not as punitive measures to incarcerate more people. We need to federally push for funding for how we come up with preventative measures for rehabilitation and not mass incarceration. I also support expanding and using Medicaid as a way to pay for housing. There's a section in HUD, Section 202, that's specifically for seniors. And in this, I know I gotta wrap up. In this section, it is not funded right now. That is something that I will push for. And the final thing I will say is Juan de Leon Gutierrez is on my mind. He is an immigrant child, the fifth one that has died in ICE detention centers. Shame on us if we continue to let this happen. My name is Kina Collins, and I'm running for Congress in Illinois 7.